I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow. Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, Gore has just elected the country's youngest ever mayor. 23-year-old Ben Bell joins us live. Auckland's new mayor has locked onto another target, this time calling for the entire board of the council's development arm to resign. And we talked to two councillors who've had their one-on-one kōrero with Wayne Brown. What did they chat about? And was there tea and bickies? Ruapehu lifetime pass holders want to know if their ticket to ride could be redundant. And 2 police officers are rewarded for their bravery during the Dunedin supermarket knife attack. Don't forget, you can catch us live on Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Mārie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Auckland's new mayor is continuing to put pressure on the city's council-controlled organisations, calling for more resignations. Wayne Brown spent much of his campaign promising to sort out the CCOs, such as Auckland Transport and the development organisation Eke Panuku. The chair of Auckland Transport has resigned, and Mr Brown has publicly called on Panuku's chair to follow suit. Today he widened that to the whole Panuku board. He was asked by RNZ reporter Finn Blackwell which other CCOs need a shake-up.
All of them. Anyone in particular you think needs to step down?
I think you should go back and read what I said on the way through around the circuit, mate.
You can hear more about this on Checkpoint shortly. The chair of Panuku has reiterated it's up to the mayor to make any changes to the board. Paul Marjuri says he's happy to have a kōrero with Mr Brown to discuss the board's performance. Mr Marjuri says the Eke Panuku team has done a great job for Tāmaki Makaurau and all CCOs serve at the pleasure of the council. Gore district has elected the youngest mayor in New Zealand history by fewer than 10 votes. 23-year-old Ben Bell has ousted the incumbent mayor of the last 18 years, Tracy Hicks, after the counting of special votes. He's held a narrow lead since the preliminary results were announced on Sunday evening. The final tally was 2,371 votes for Ben Bell and 2,363 for Tracy Hicks. And Lumsden businessman Rob Scott has also just been announced as the new mayor of the Southland district after the final count of special votes. Forest and Bird is calling for an overhaul of ocean management, saying the government is falling short of protecting our marine environment. The latest stocktake shows the seas around Aotearoa are rising at a higher rate and are hotter, dirtier and more acidic than ever before. Oceans, Fisheries and Environment Minister David Parker says some aspects of climate change are beyond control. Forest and Bird climate spokesperson Jeff Key says that's not good enough.
We need to see an end to bottom drilling. It's destroying the seabed. We need to see an end to new coal mines so that we're not putting more CO2 into the atmosphere and making the ocean more acidic. And we need to clean up the water that's flowing down our rivers and coming out of our pipes into the sea.
Jeff Key says government agencies, including councils, need to work better and together for what they call an ocean crisis. The government will commit $16.7 million to help create the country's first land-based salmon farm. Mount Cook Alpine Salmon launched the project today in Twizel. Chief Executive David Cole says the project is innovative but does carry risk, which is why the Crown is involved. The money will come from the Ministry for Primary Industries Sustainable Food and Fibre Futures Fund. Thousands of people are waiting to hear what will happen to their lifetime ski passes for Ruapehu, with the ski lift operator going into voluntary administration. Ohakuni resident Harry Haralambi says he bought his lifetime pass for about $2,000 in 1996. He's not expecting it will work by this time next year. He believes Ruapehu Alpine Lift was essentially hamstrung by its charitable status because it could only earn money predominantly from ski passes. And a witness has described seeing multiple police cars and about 25 officers with guns swarming a West Auckland street this morning. A police spokesperson says they responded to multiple reports of disorder on Miranda Street in Avondale at about 10:40. One person reportedly made threats of having a firearm, but no firearm has been located by staff. An employee of nearby Glenburn Tyre Services, Des Brody, says this is usually a quiet neighbourhood.
A whole heap of cop cars, police with machine guns. They all got out, stood over there. There's probably 25 policemen armed, and then they all hopped in the cars and drove over the hill there.
There aren't any reports of serious injuries and inquiries are ongoing. In sport, after 6 months out from injury, midfielder Anton Linnett-Brown is back in the All Blacks. Fold? I'll start that again. After 6 months out from injury, midfielder Anton Linnett-Brown is back in the All Blacks fold and confident he'll be fit to play the first game of the Northern Tour in Japan in a couple of weeks. Linnett-Brown has recovered from shoulder surgery but only returned to play for Waikato last weekend.
No, I'll be good to go. Got a couple of weeks to sort of do some hard mahi and get prepared for that. So, if I'm selected, I'll definitely be available.
Cricket Australia looks set to revoke David Warner's lifetime ban from leadership positions. Warner was banned from international cricket for a year and from leadership positions for life for his role in the 2018 ball tampering scandal in South Africa. There have been calls for the ban to be dropped to allow Warner to be considered for the vacancy as Australia's one-day international captain, and the Board of Cricket Australia is now considering that. Mo Salah scored the fastest hat-trick in Champions League football history as Liverpool trounced Rangers 7-1. Salah came off the bench midway through the second half to score an incredible 6-minute hat-trick. Manly Rugby League coach Des Hasler has been sacked, according to a Sydney Morning Herald report. And the New Zealand men's team pursuit has narrowly missed out on qualifying for the bronze medal ride at the World Track Cycling Champs in Paris, while Michaela Drummond finished 5th in the women's 10-kilometre scratch race. That's the news.
The bar is raised for some new migrants.
It's called skilled migrant residence, which used to be our Ferrari. For a tradesperson now it's going to be a Skoda.
Banning a crowd favourite. What do you mean you've taken the kakapo out?
Every year we add a few new birds and take some birds off. I wasn't at Forest and Bird last year.
And a bird didn't even win. And beaming back from space.
These images are amazing. You look at them and you think, surely there's something wrong with the telescope. It can't really just be that pristine and beautiful, and it's just remarkable.
Bringing things down to earth. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, often cloudy. A few showers, some possibly heavy in Northland, clearing Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow afternoon. From Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, showers, some heavy and thundery today, clearing from the south this evening and tomorrow morning, but remaining mostly cloudy. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with scattered showers. Horowhenua to Wellington, also for Wairarapa and the Marlborough Sounds, mostly cloudy. Rain clearing this evening and fine breaks developing, however, isolated showers developing tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Marlborough, also for Canterbury and North Otago, partly cloudy. Isolated light showers clearing tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Otago, also for Southland, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland. Generally fine, but some cloudy periods about Dunedin, Clutha and Southland. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few light showers. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint te tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland's new mayor wants more people to resign from their jobs and is now calling for the whole board of development arm Panuku to go. Wayne Brown put the council-controlled organisations on notice throughout his campaign. The chair of AT resigned hours after he won the mayoral chains on Saturday. On Monday, Mr Brown publicly told the Panuku boss to reconsider his position, and today the rest of the board. Late this afternoon, he said he's yet to be convinced the organisation should exist at all. Finn Blackwell caught up with the main man on his way to work.
5 days into his reign as Auckland's new mayor, Wayne Brown's still not interested in doing media interviews. So we went to ask him a few questions as he arrived at work.
And are there any, just before you go, are there any other CCOs that you think need a bit of a shake-up?
All of them.
All of them? Anyone in particular you think needs to step down?
I think you should go back and read what I said on the way through around the circuit.
Wayne Brown was elected on a promise he'll be Mr. Fix-It, and it seems like the first step for him is to clean house. Auckland Transport, Eke Panuku, Auckland Unlimited, all in his sights either over personnel, the funding they get, or both. The Mayor has publicly called on Panuku's chair to consider his position. We've asked Paul Majori for an interview several times, but he's unavailable. In a statement, he says he's happy to have a kōrero with the new Mayor. Today, Wayne Brown told the Herald, actually, the whole board should go. Eke Panuku is responsible for a number of developments around the city, including Auckland's Wynyard Quarter. Wayne Brown says he's shocked about the value for money ratepayers are getting from the CCO. But strolling through Wynyard Quarter today, these people say the improvements have been good.
I think it looks great. I think they've done a really good job. I love all the greenery, and I think I love that they've still got the fish market too.
Can't complain. Happy to work here, and yeah, good place to maybe come down on the weekend too.
Lots more choice, and I love all the different shops and the restaurants.
I think it looks great. I love it. I love coming down here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not everything is finished yet, but the parts which are finished look really nice.
Former mayoral candidate Viv Beck says Brown has had a clear vision for his leadership since the campaign.
I think what we're seeing is true to form. Wayne Brown's made it very clear through the campaign what he's interested in focusing on, and I think he's getting on with that job quickly.
She isn't surprised the mayor's already calling for resignations.
In the end, the mayor has to be able to work with the councillors, so I think time will tell, and I think the appointments he's going to make will be insightful and important in terms of how the job will get done.
The mayor has announced the makeup of part of his advisory team. Husband and wife pairing Tim Hurdle and Jacinda Lean will be the interim chief and deputy chief of staff respectively. Political commentator and lobbyist Matthew Hooton will be the interim head of policy and communications. Meanwhile, playing out in real time, the Wayne Brown mayoralty is keeping Aucklanders and CCOs on their toes.
Keen for your feedback on that one. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Meanwhile, Gore has elected the country's youngest ever mayor. 23-year-old Ben Bell has beaten Tracy Hicks by 8 votes after waiting a nail-biting 5 days for 67 special votes to be counted. Mr Hicks had been mayor since 2004, while Ben Bell joins me now. Ben, has the new reality sunk in just yet?
No, I mean, my phone hasn't stopped ringing since, so I think once I get through all the reporters and people trying to get in touch with me, I might get a chance to sit and actually think about what's happened.
Have you stopped shaking since you found out?
No, not quite yet.
Tell me about that, when it was confirmed.
Just excitement. So my mother just happened to be in the room, so she was ecstatic, big hugs and everything like that. I could barely get off the phone, before the excitement went through the building.
So you went straight for the top job, right? You didn't stand for council, now you're the mayor. Why do you think people voted for you?
I think people voted for change, something different here in Gore. Tracy Hicks did a good job in his 18 years, and he was well liked across the community. But I think people just wanted something different, and I think that's a great legacy to leave behind. That people wanted change because you've served for such a long time, and that's awesome to be remembered by.
We've got Mr. Fix-It here in Auckland, Wayne Brown. So what are you going to fix down there in Gore?
So the campaign's been all about back to basics. So it's fixing our rural roads, it's working on our water infrastructure, and it's getting a recycling scheme going here in Gore. So nothing too exciting, but less spending on the flashy projects.
Oh, I don't know. That sounds pretty exciting. People don't like potholes and they like to recycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you reckon you bring as the youngest mayor in the country? What does that mean to you? And how will it be different?
I don't know. That's a great question. I guess I got an element of got to prove that young people can be in leadership roles like this, being, the youngest mayor by 5 years. So I've got quite a bit of weight on my shoulders in terms of having a good impression on, the country, not only the district of Gore.
Yeah, do you feel a bit of weight?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, that still hasn't sunk in yet. But I've got 11 great people around the table that'll help me every step of the way. So that's fantastic.
Hey, as the youngest mayor, I'm wondering if you've got any reflections or advice, thoughts for potentially the oldest mayor in the country, which is Mayor Brown.
It's just getting out there in the community and listening to what your community has to say. I know that's incredibly hard in Auckland because there's so many people, but there's got to be ways to do it. People didn't know me particularly well and thought I was too young, and I went out there and I talked to people, and obviously we got the result that we have today.
Yeah, tell me about the kind of campaign that you did run, because you actually went out and spoke to all sorts of voters, didn't you, old and young?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got engaged with the younger people through, social media and avenues like that. But the older community also needs to be really valued, and so we got out and I went to senior citizens and the RSA and nattering knitters and a whole sort. We also did some unique stuff. So we had a caravan that we took around, and we went to all the smaller communities in the Gore district, because it's more than just Gore here. There's Matara, there's Waimumu, Waikaka, Pukarau. So we went around to all of these places, bought the caravan, and people could come out of their homes and have a chat. So we found that was really successful. Just something a bit different.
What kind of mayor do you want to be?
I think I want to be a mayor that engages with the councillors and engages with the community, and so we have a united front as a community and as a council that we're all heading in the same direction.
8 votes. Wow, 8 votes. Could you have cut it any finer?
I don't think I could. Yeah, everyone was saying it would be 50-50, and they were exactly right down the middle.
What do you think your first day is going to be like?
First day, well, I've got a bit of catching up to do. I'm a week behind everyone else. The likes of Wayne Brown have been in for almost a week now. So it's talking to my fellow councillors, getting to know what their priorities are, their communities are saying, and learning a bit more about where they want to be in the council and moving forward from there. Congratulations, Ben, and all the best. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Ben Bow, Mayor of Gore. Just getting used to the title he is. It is 16 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. There are thousands of Ruapehu lifetime pass holders who want to know if their ticket to ride could soon be redundant. The company's administrators, PwC, say all options are on the table as they try to dig it out of a debt bill of around $50 million. That means there could be a new owner, asset sales, or a closure of both the ski fields altogether. It means more uncertainty for shareholders and other Central North Island businesses with skin in the game. Katie Todd has the story.
In the wallet of Oakuni local Harry Haralambi is a coveted accessory for any keen Kiwi skier, a special life ski pass giving him unlimited access to the slopes of Whakapapa and Turoa. It cost about $2,000 when he got it in 1996. About 14,000 people have one of these. But Harry Haralambi isn't holding out hope it will be worth much by next season.
It was always going to be the case, whether the business goes into liquidation or Vale Resorts came and bought the ski resort, or NZ Ski bought the ski resort. They wouldn't honour some previous thing, but that's one of the risks you kind of take.
Harry Haralambi knows a thing or two about how ski resorts work around the world. His company provides software to RAL, along with large ski resorts in North America and Canada. But he's bracing to lose RAL as a client. He believes the company was essentially hamstrung by its charitable status, leaving it at the mercy of the weather, which this year was soggy and warm. Overseas, he says ski resorts use other means to keep up their cash flow.
They make money because they own the accommodations and the lodges and the restaurants and the bars, and and shops and facilities in their neighbouring towns, and on mountain. Whereas RAL are a charitable trust business. They don't pay tax, which sounds like a good thing. Every business would like to not pay tax, but there's no free lunch. And part of that means RAL are not allowed to own businesses and earn money off mountain.
On the other side of the Monga, in the village of Whakapapa, is Sam Clarkson, who runs the RAL Life Pass Holders and Shareholders Group and also owns Scotel Alpine Resort. He has a very different view on the situation, accusing RAL of 20 years of poor governance for its financial woes. It simply didn't have enough of a focus on skiing and snowboarding, he says, instead moving into public transport, investing in Whakapapa as a sightseeing destination, and setting up a ticket and information hub in Taupō.
The name of the company says it all. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts. Each of those words has a meaning. And one of the things that's gone wrong with this company is that they haven't stuck to their knitting, which is running lifts in the alpine area of Ruapehu. They've sought to do other things which they should not have been doing.
In the town of National Park, Marie Lindhog owns Ivan's ski and board rental store. She believes RAL missed chances to expand the ski area out west and trim down the lift queues. And she says the company's voluntary administration is partly a result of how it treated shareholders.
It didn't surprise me because we went to the annual general meeting in May and the shareholders, active, lively shareholders, put their case forward and it went on deaf ears.
The future of the ski fields is an emotional topic to talk about, she concedes. Her dad established the rental store in the 1970s. It survived the eruptions, good and bad seasons, and even COVID, which her restaurant down the road succumbed to. But what comes next is unclear. Back in Whakapapa village, it's clear the stakes are high too. Today few people are about, with the ski field shut for heavy rain. Coffee cart owner Tony Kornui says businesses like hers wouldn't survive a permanent closure.
If the mountain didn't open, it would basically kill the village, because why would you come here unless you come here to do the walk, to do the crossing? Summertime would be fine, but not winter. Sometimes good things come out of bad things, so I'm always positive that something could happen, that somebody's out there that's thinking, hey, I could make a difference, or I could step up, or we might be able to buy it, or we just don't know. So we just got to play each day as it comes.
The shareholders group says it's looking forward to sharing their thoughts with RAL's voluntary administrators as soon as possible. The first creditors meeting is planned for next Thursday.
And that was Katie Todd reporting. It is almost 22 after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback on Wayne Brown now. One listener says, anyone who can't work with other people ain't gonna fix diddly squat. That from Jim. Neil's got in touch to say Mayor Brown has certainly hit the ground running. It bodes well for the ratepayers of Auckland. Jeff, however, says, Mr Brown, you're there for all Aucklanders. Many developments are working well. We don't need a wrecking ball. Do keep your feedback coming. So, homai o whakaaro on anything you've heard on the program this evening. We would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or send us an email. It's checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is standing by. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The new Mayor of Auckland says he's shocked about the value for money ratepayers are getting from all council-controlled organisations. Wayne Brown has already said the chair and board for Eke Panuku's development arm should stand down, and he's told Checkpoint today they aren't the only one due for a shake-up. Gore District has elected the youngest mayor in New Zealand history by just 8 votes. 23-year-old Ben Bell has ousted the incumbent mayor of the last 18 years, Tracy Hicks, after the counting of special votes. Ben Bell told Checkpoint his mum gave him a big hug when the news came through. He says he wants to prove young people can do well in leadership roles and plans to start by fixing Gore's water, roads and recycling. The Oceans, Fisheries and Environment Minister says a new government report today on the state of New Zealand's waters is a stark warning. David Parker says some aspects of climate change are beyond New Zealanders' control, but that's no excuse to do nothing. Britain's Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is facing pressure from MPs within her own Conservative Party to revise her tax-cutting plans. Earlier, she told Parliament that she wouldn't cut public spending to pay for tax cuts or to help with energy bills. And more than 60 Wellington peak bus services are being cut temporarily from next week to improve reliability. Metlink says the move is to minimise uncertainty. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, most of the country is moving as per normal. On Auckland's State Highway 18, Upper Harbour Highway, a crash that was blocking the right eastbound lane for a couple of hours this afternoon after Tokenu Road off-ramp was cleared just before 5 this afternoon, but there may still be delays. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
No mihi, Evie. 9-time Australian Open champion Novak Djokovic will miss the Grand Slam in January unless he can come to an arrangement with the Australian federal government. Djokovic, who is unvaccinated against COVID-19, is banned from re-entering Australia until 2025 after he was deported this year following a messy saga that resulted in a failed courtroom battle to restore his visa. Tennis Australia Chief Executive Craig Tilley says he's spoken with the Serbian and would welcome him back for the Open.
Ultimately, it's a matter for him and the federal government, and whatever they have to do, they have to do. And there's an entry deadline, in December for the Australian Open, so they'll obviously have to meet that timeline.
And we're joined now by our sports reporter Felicity Reid. So, Felicity, what does Novak Djokovic need to do to get back into Australia this year?
Well, there is some room for the Australian government to use their discretion to waive Djokovic's 3-year ban. He would have to apply for an exemption, and as you can imagine, if this was approved, that would be a bit of an unpopular outcome in some sectors. Australia's former Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews has said she'd be opposed to the government lifting this ban. She says it would be a slap in the face for the Australians who had been vaccinated. And it seems Craig Tilley there, he might have learnt something from the backlash he faced earlier this year with the handling of Djokovic's entry to Australia and that medical exemption that really wasn't. Tilley is wanting to separate himself from this matter and leave it to the government. He is saying that he has not had any contact with the government and can't lobby on Djokovic's behalf to get the ban overturned. So it's, I guess, really putting in like a clear division. However, Tilley has spoken with Djokovic at the Laver Cup and says that Serbian has moved on from the drama of earlier this year and his deportation and is looking to actually come back to Australia. And Djokovic himself has sort of said he's been waiting on some positive news from the Australian authorities. And he will want to get back to Australia because earlier this year when he was in Australia or should have been in Australia for the Australian Open, he was world number 1. Now he's dropped to world ranking number 10. So he's starting to see the impact of missing these tournaments because he isn't vaccinated.
And what do we know about the status of Russian players being able to play at the Australian Open next year?
The Russian players will be able to compete in Melbourne, but they can't represent their country. So that's no flags or national anthems, and they'll be playing as independent or neutral players. The Russian athletes were banned from Wimbledon and international team competitions like the Davis Cup, but they can compete as neutrals at the French and US Opens, so that's a similar line for the Australian Open. But I guess the status of these players is always going to be questioned at each tournament as the issues between Russia and Ukraine continue.
OK, let's stay in Australia, but switch to cricket. David Warner might get a reprieve from his leadership ban. What's the deal?
Yeah, Cricket Australia will review Warner's lifetime captaincy ban at a board meeting tomorrow. Warner has been banned from leadership roles since 2018 for his part in the sandpaper scandal, that ball tampering incident that was caught on camera and during a match in South Africa. Cricket Australia would have to modify their code of conduct to let Warner skipper aside again. But he has actually got some of the backing from the big names across the Tasman, the likes of Ian Chappell, Alan Border, Adam Gilchrist, Ricky Ponting. They've all been supportive of lifting this ban on the captaincy. And I think a lot of that's also because Australia kind of are in need of a new ODI captain. Aaron Finch retired from international 50-over cricket, and in the not-so-distant future, they're going to need a new T20 captain as well. So a few vacancies around that Warner could fill if this ban was lifted.
Thanks, Felicity. That's Felicity Reid, our sports reporter there. The sea is rising twice as fast, and that sea is hotter, dirtier and more acidic than ever before. The latest stocktake by the Ministry for the Environment and Stats New Zealand paints a sobering picture. But some are calling for an overhaul of current ocean management, saying government agencies aren't doing enough. Our reporter Kirsty Frame has more.
Our oceans, our taonga species, our coastal communities, all bearing the brunt of the changing tides. Ocean acidification has risen 8.6% in just over a decade, and the water is also more polluted. The Ministry for the Environment's Natasha Lewis says the report shows the marine environment is on the ultimate receiving end of human activities.
The activities we undertake on land that are contributing sediment, nutrients, pathogens and plastics into our marine environment, the activities we undertake at sea, commercial fishing, shipping, and of course climate change. You can see the impact of climate change really strongly through this report in terms of ocean acidification and sea level rise.
The ocean absorbs much of the world's carbon emissions and can store a lot of heat on top of that. Marine heat waves are now more frequent and severe and can have damaging effects. NIWA oceanographer and University of Auckland professor Craig Stevens explains.
It will really make it difficult for the marine ecosystem and the sort of industries and social uses. If you imagine that happening for several years in a row, I think some of the surprises will come in how we restructure what our coastal environment looks like.
3/4 of identified taonga species are threatened or close to threatened by extinction. That included majority of sea and shorebirds. It's getting harder for shellfish such as paua to grow while pipi are smothered by sediments. Oceans, Fisheries and Environment Minister David Parker says some aspects of climate change are beyond New Zealand's control. Forest and Bird climate spokesperson Jeff Key says they don't think that's good enough.
We need to see an end to bottom drilling. It's destroying the seabed. We need to see an end to new coal mines so that we're not putting more CO2 into the atmosphere and making the ocean more acidic. And we need to clean up the water that gets flowing down our rivers and coming out of our pipes into the sea.
And Forest and Bird wants a marine plastic prevention program. But the report does show some things are on the up. Natasha Lewis says in some places rates of algae and nitrogen are slightly declining.
There are community groups, there are catchment group councils, iwi working hard across the country to restore the quality of freshwater environment into the marine environment, and we are starting to see some improvement.
The report highlights there are gaps in marine data for New Zealand seas. Some things could not be concluded because of the lack of data. Like the Great Big Ocean, there are still large unknowns on the full state of our marine environment.
And that was Kirsty Frame reporting. It is 29 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoints on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoe I nai ko Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas Poynton joins us live. Nicholas, bank customers staying ahead on their home loan repayments.
Yeah, look, I think this is some encouraging news here, although it is somewhat backward looking. This is some data we got from the Bankers Association that it's collected from 10 of its member banks, and it's for the first 6 months of the year. And what it shows is that the number of people behind on loan repayments dropped from 2% to 1.05%. Nearly 46% of people with a home loan are ahead of their repayments, which is up 1.8% compared to the previous 6 months. And this sort of gels with some information, some other economic data we got recently. The credit reporting firm Centrix, you may remember a while ago, released some figures that showed that consumers were falling behind on other forms of debt, things like their personal loans or vehicle finance, but their home loans, that remained number one. And it sort of seems that as the cost of living increases, interest rate rises, people's biggest financial priorities will always tend to be having a roof over their head, so paying off their mortgage, food, their utilities, and then everything else after that becomes somewhat secondary, becomes a bit of a luxury. That sort of explains to some degree why vehicle finance arrears are creeping up to a 2-year high. And the number of people who have their personal loan in arrears is up 8% on a year ago. The fascinating thing here will be Interest rates have been climbing. What will happen in the months ahead, given the OCR is forecast to go much higher than it currently is?
Speaking of climbing, we're being told to get into the brace position for higher gas prices from next month. This is your heating and hot water rather than what you're putting in your car, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, this isn't necessarily good news because consumers around the country, as you mentioned, can expect a steep rise in their home power bills from next month. Contact and Genesis Energy both confirmed that gas prices are likely to rise by as much as 11% next month. That's for customers who are not already on fixed-term contracts. In Contact's Chief Executive Mike Fuge, he was on 9 to noon today, saying that these rises are really the result of higher input costs, namely the higher price of carbon, which has gone from about $20 to well into the 70s. Obviously, carbon has, these firms have to buy carbon credits to offset the emissions that's caused in sort of gas energy generation, supplying that, extracting it, supplying it to consumers. They're not going to wear the cost of that, so you shouldn't be surprised that as a consumer you're going to have to pay the price. Also, the supply of gas has been under pressure the past couple of years. Production at some of our gas fields, there have been intermittent outages. That's also affecting things as well. Electricity prices, a small proportion of electricity produced in New Zealand is generated by coal imports spiked in price. A lot of that's to do with the war in Ukraine. So Mike Fuge from Contact says the company's been absorbing costs where it can, hasn't been passing all of them on to consumers. And Paul Fuge from the price comparison website Power Switch has some sage advice to everybody out there, saying that these price increases have the general price increase has not been consistent across retailers in the market. His advice is that it's on people to really go out there and shop around for a better deal. He says the average savings people are making are around $300. So great time to be shopping around for perhaps a new energy or power deal.
Nicholas, let's take a womble around the markets.
Yeah, the NZX down 56 points to 10,817. The dollar trading at 56.1 US cents, 89.4 Australian and 50.6 pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite. That's Nicholas Poynton with Business News. A GP accused of breaking the rules on prescribing ADHD drugs like Ritalin says he's on a mission to change the system. Tony Han has been giving evidence at his own disciplinary hearing, saying if he didn't act, hundreds of patients would have missed out on critical care in an overburdened health system. But the prosecution says that is no excuse. He should have known better. Health correspondent Ron Quinn is at the hearing.
Tony Han's an expert in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and says it's not difficult for him to spot.
I mean, you could look in the news every day and you can see people who obviously have ADHD. People like Boris Johnson, for example, would be, he's not my patient, do you understand?
In practice, he says he takes a meticulous and systematic approach to diagnosing the condition. There are no accusations that he's overdiagnosed or overprescribed. The problem is that he's failed to prescribe according to the rules, which require an approval from a psychiatrist or a paediatrician. He says he was motivated by trying to be a caring and empathetic doctor for his patients.
I have many ADHD patients who come to me because they cannot afford private care or they are unable to access public care for ADHD.
The prosecution acknowledges Tony Han's an expert, but says that's why he should have known better. He says in 1999, Pharmac gave him verbal approval for a scheme where he got a psychiatrist to sign off prescriptions for him without any discussion unless a problem arose. Prosecution lawyer Belinda Johns says Pharmac has no record of it.
It's not accepted by the PCC, but if that is the case back in 1999, you were allowed to do something. You can't tell me that that gives you carte blanche, the right to do that indefinitely.
She says the rules are in place for a good reason. A GP expert earlier told the hearing ADHD could sometimes mask other more complex conditions that would be made worse by the drugs.
His evidence was that psychiatrists are better equipped to diagnose these complex or coexisting psychiatric illnesses than a GP.
But Dr. Hand pushed back on that, saying GPs care for patients with psychiatric conditions every day. He says he repeatedly asked health authorities for help to resolve the problem where patients couldn't see a specialist but urgently needed meds. None came, but he hopes the hearing will change that.
I want vindication of what I've done, but more than that, I want the medical authorities to begin to move towards providing much more easily accessible by GPs care of ADHD.
He says he doesn't regret taking the action to help his patients, but he does regret that he's now in a stressful disciplinary hearing after 60 years of practising medicine.
Rowan Quinn reporting there, and it is 21 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. Both sides of the coin, potentially our youngest mayor ever and on one of our oldest mayors ever. Ben Bell, this is the young man who's won the mayoralty in Gore. This person says big advantage of being a young mayor is that you have to listen to people in order to learn, unlike an older mayor who brings a load of baggage. And on Wayne Brown, Auckland's new mayor, this person says surely Brown is heading down a terrible path. Look at who he's brought in, his mates like Hooton. Another listener says, oh really? Auckland Council is more than one ego. Grow up, Wayne Brown. Simon says Wayne Brown does not have the power or the right to personally choose CCO board members. On the other hand, this listener reckons, finally, with Wayne Brown, we have a talented, practical, non-woke mayor, independent and working for the ratepayers and not a political party. Someone else has got in touch to say skills shortage, and we want people with knowledge of our systems to resign. The trend around the world is for a strong man to save us. Grow up, Auckland, grow up, Wayne Brown. Easy to condemn, learn to lead. He aha o whakaaro, what do you think? We would love to hear from you. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know your thoughts. The youngest mayor in the country, Ben Bell, elected in Gore, and Wayne Brown calling for more resignations here in Auckland. Love to hear from you. It is time now to go to the headlines. Anei a iwi mena pita pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. The head of one of Auckland's biggest council-operated agencies has reiterated it's up to the newly elected mayor to make any changes to the board. Wayne Brown has said the chair and board for Ikepanoku's development arm should stand down. Ikepanoku chairperson Paul Majuri says the team has done a great job, but all CCOs serve at the pleasure of the council. Forest and Bird says the government is falling short of protecting our marine environment after the latest stocktake of Aotearoa's coastal waters was released today. Spokesperson Jeff Key says government agencies need to work better and together to fix what he calls an ocean crisis. The UN General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly to condemn Russia's attempts to annex 4 regions of Ukraine. 143 member states backed the resolution. The government will commit $16.7 million to help create the country's first land-based salmon farm. Mount Cook Alpine Salmon launched the project today in Twizel. The police commissioner says 2 officers who apprehended a knife-wielding attacker in a Dunedin supermarket last year did an outstanding job. Andrew Costa presented Constable Sophie Ellison and Detective Constable Jeremy Toski with Police Association Bravery Awards in Wellington this morning. And health warnings are being issued for a lake in Canterbury after a potentially toxic blue-green algae was found. Te Whatu Ora says Lake Forsyth in the Banks Peninsula should be avoided by people and animals until warnings are lifted. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing to see here. Everything looks pretty good by these traffic updates. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Fantastic. Thank you, Evie. A new wave of COVID is emerging in Europe with a bump in hospitalisations. The World Health Organization says it's clear the pandemic is not over yet, and it's seeing indicators rising again, suggesting another wave of infections has begun. Back here, scientists say the resurgence is being driven by new subvariants. So have they reached Aotearoa yet, and what does it mean for us? Well, joining us now is Dr. Joop de Ligt, the Senior Science Lead for Genomics at ESR. Kia ora, Doctor.
Kia ora.
What can you tell us? What is the latest on emerging variants?
So I think that the question you ask is, are they here yet? Yes, they are. They're knocking on our door and they're coming in. What's slightly different this time around is that it's not just one variant, but it's a whole collection of them that we're seeing on the rise in Europe and in the US.
And you have just announced today that you found another one. What is it?
So this is the very exciting name of BQ.1.1, and it's one of those that has been having quite an impact in Europe, where it's steadily rising, above its brothers and sisters that are doing the rounds. It's one that we're watching quite closely to see if that's going to cause another big peak.
So what do we know about it? Is it easier to spread? Is it more severe? Does it have the same symptoms? What do you know about it?
So what we know about at the moment is that it definitely spreads more easily than its brothers and sisters that are doing the rounds at the moment, which is mostly due to the fact that it has gotten better at evading the previous immunity that we might have had from the previous waves of COVID. So that means
if you have had COVID before, another strain of it, that does nothing to protect you from this, as you say, fantastically named BQ 1.1. So even if you've had another version of the COVID, it doesn't protect you from this one. You could get this one.
No, you can definitely get it. I wouldn't say that it doesn't protect you at all. There's still better protection than if you have not had the vaccine or if you've not had the disease at all. You're still better protected if you have had a version of COVID, but it offers less protection than it did for our previous variants.
So it's a bit trickier at evading while seeking out people who have lesser immunity.
Correct.
So what does that mean for us then? Is it better to get these variants as we head into summer rather than winter?
We don't have that much choice in terms of those variants getting them or not, as they're being actively imported with tourism and all those other things that are really good for our economy picking back up. They will be carried across from the Northern Hemisphere to here, and we've seen that today with the release in the media that they are arriving at our shores. And in terms of the advice, it's still best to not get it at all. That's still the safest thing to try and do. And there are international calls to see if there's those additional boosters that contain that new variant to start offering those more widely.
So what are the implications of that specifically then in terms of the vaccine? Because I noticed that Australia has started giving a strain-specific vaccine. Do we need to do that in New Zealand, given all these variants?
I think that it's definitely one of the things that others are looking at, and as you rightfully point out, Australia is already rolling that out. And the other thing that we just have to be mindful as well is that these antivirals that people have been getting, they might also be less effective at sort of preventing that disease from happening. So it's another thing that we just need to review as these new variants come out and then try and come up with the best approach.
So how many variants do we have in New Zealand, and which one is still the dominant strain?
So in New Zealand, we have sort of four major players at the moment. The major one is still the old one, if you will, that we excitedly call that BA5. That's sort of the main variant that drove our previous wave, and that's still the majority variant. But we've indicated that that's very likely to change over the next couple of weeks, where we will see those other variants coming up. And that's a collection of four at the moment that also internationally are spreading quite rapidly.
So you think that will be overtaken as the dominant variant in as little as a couple of weeks?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is there's not so many people being tested now, right? So are we doing enough of what you do, genomic testing, to know exactly what's coming over the border and what we have, or do we need to do more testing?
I think it's definitely the point in time where we're trying to understand what these variants mean, where more testing would be appropriate. And of course, with some of those border surveillance measures dropping out, we have slightly less visibility of what's coming on. Luckily, we still have the wastewater that is helping us sort of keep tabs on that, which doesn't rely as much on people getting tested.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's Dr. Joop de Ligt from ESR. So, you might be over COVID, but it's not over us at the moment. New strain identified here in New Zealand. And as he was saying, expecting the dominant strain to be overtaken in the next couple of weeks. A group of men was empowered to make the final judgment on allegations of abuse at the Gloria Vale Christian community. The overseeing shepherd of Gloria Vale, Howard Temple, has told the Abuse and Care Inquiry that all decisions were made based on community doctrine and the Bible. Andrew McRae reports.
In what is a rare public appearance, 82-year-old Howard Temple spoke to the Royal Commission via video link today. Counsel for the Commission, Kathy Bashir, asked him how Gloria Vale dealt with matters of abuse.
For victims, that meant they had to appear in a room in front of perhaps 5 leaders and be told to forgive their offender.
They were just asked if they could forgive this person for what he had done.
So it was possibly in front of the whole congregation?
Possibly, yes. Possibly, yes.
Mr Temple says while he was part of the leadership team under former leader Hopeful Christian in the 80s and 90s, he wasn't aware of allegations of sexual abuse within the community.
And isn't it true that Hopeful Christian would have told you about complaints and confessions of sexual and physical abuse in that time before he was convicted?
Not particularly. Not particularly, no. Because at that time, he dealt with a lot of issues just on his own.
He agreed a comment he made that the limit of knowledge by leaders about abuse was because victims were reluctant to come forward was actually victim blaming.
It could be interpreted that way, yes. The victim could not have spoken up and out of fear or reason like that.
Mr Temple admitted the leadership did not report allegations of abuse to police.
That would have prevented a lot of it happening because when the police got a hold of it, now we were more casual in our investigation, but the police came in and they got right into it and dug right down to the roots of the thing and discovered things that we would never imagine, that never even thought that had been happening.
The lawyer for Gloria Vale, Chris Shannon, told the inquiry that the community of about 600 people live their lives according to their understanding of the New Testament scripture and under New Zealand law.
It's not uncommon for religious organisations to have faced the blight of sexual abuse and to have historically dealt with it inadequately. Gloria Vale's no exception to that.
He says the community is making serious efforts to deal with abuse and members are now encouraged to go to the police.
Andrew McRae reporting. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has been ordered to pay nearly $1 billion in damages to families of Sandy Hook victims. 26 people, including 20 children aged between 6 and 7, were killed in December 2012 at Sandy Hook Elementary School. It was the second deadliest mass shooting in US history. Today's legal win comes after Jones falsely claimed the victims were actors who faked the tragedy. CNN's Alexandra Field reports.
Damages past and future.
After nearly a decade of profound and excruciating suffering, a jury awarding nearly $1 billion to the families of 8 victims killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School and an FBI agent who responded to the scene of the massacre.
Today, a jury representing our community and our nation rendered a historic verdict. A verdict against Alex Jones's lies and their poisonous spread, and a verdict for truth and for our common humanity.
The money, compensatory damages, not for the brutal loss of their loved ones, but for the lies that followed, spread by InfoWars host Alex Jones, who called the massacre a hoax, its victims crisis actors.
I know that this is not the end of Alex Jones in my life. I know that his hate, lies, and conspiracy theories will follow both me and my family through the rest of our days. But I'm also hopeful for what happened here today, that it may save other families from high-profile tragedies from the cycle of abuse and re-traumatization.
The plaintiffs holding hands, comforting one another, and weeping while the judge read the jury's decisions. Each of them rewarded tens of millions of dollars. The largest award of $120 million to Robbie Parker, the father of a 6-year-old girl, Emily, killed at Sandy Hook. He had testified to the pain he and others endured from lies believed by so many.
And I was especially starting to feel like I was failing her in her death.
because of what people were saying about her and what they were saying about me trying to remember her.
The jury's award as close to a win as any these families could have.
All I can really say is that I'm just proud that what we were able to accomplish was just to simply tell the truth. And it shouldn't be this hard, and it shouldn't be this scary.
Jones was not present in the courtroom for the reading of the verdict. He never testified in his own defense during the course of the nearly month-long trial, but he made fiery statements during a cross-examination.
I don't apologize for it.
And that report was from CNN. Kiwi women with advanced breast cancer are dying twice as fast as overseas patients, according to research from the Breast Cancer Foundation. But a new set of clinical guidelines launched today is set to change that. Louise Tanuth explains.
First diagnosed in 2017, it came back in 2019, and then I was diagnosed for a third time this year. It was only this year that they told me that I had a short period of time left.
Anne-Marie Hope Cross has been fighting advanced breast cancer since she was 49. The response she initially got from her local DHB shocked her.
It was merely a letter in the mail saying the gold standard of treatment is that you'll begin within 6 weeks, but sorry, we can't actually get you to even see anybody till at least 8 weeks, so time was really of the essence.
So she took matters into her own hands with private medical insurance. Without it, she wouldn't be here today. Her background as a first responder gave her the skills to do her own research and advocate for treatment. But CEO of the Breast Cancer Foundation, Arlene Rayner, says that's not the case for many of the 400 patients diagnosed with advanced breast cancer each year.
The average survival for a Kiwi patient, 16 months, compared to 2 to 3 years or more in countries like Australia, Germany or France. Kiwis seem to receive less treatments than comparable countries. 1/4 receive no treatment at all, and often are pushed back to the back of the queue.
Advanced breast cancer, also known as metastatic, secondary or stage 4 breast cancer, is diagnosed after the cancer has spread to other parts of the patient's body. New guidelines were developed in late 2020 by a group of 20 breast cancer specialists from around the country. They aim to find the most effective high-level treatment tailored to individuals, whilst also encouraging ongoing conversations between patients and their specialists.
So this is a really complicated disease and it requires specialist care. So essentially what this will mean is that the latest treatments in terms of having guidelines mean that women can live longer and have a better quality of life for the time that they have left.
Oncologist Dr. Marion Cooper is the lead clinician behind the new framework. She says New Zealand is lagging far behind other countries.
So internationally there is a Global Breast Cancer Alliance, so they have developed these guidelines. They update them every 3 years. They are already up to the 6th version, but there was never a great buy-in from New Zealand. And New Zealand clinicians also probably didn't use them, so that there is definitely room for improvement.
Marion says they had to raise the bar for patients. Yesterday, Anne-Marie pressed pause on her chemotherapy to give her body a break. She's been given just months to live, but she's not giving up yet and is urging others to keep fighting.
I've just got to try and prove that wrong. Rattle cages, ask questions, don't wait for people to come to you. You go to them and say, when's my treatment starting, and then just keep chasing. Don't be polite and wait for them to come to you.
The Breast Cancer Foundation says managing advanced breast cancer patients during the pandemic proved a challenge. It hopes the new guidelines combined with new treatments will help some women live longer after diagnosis.
That report from Louise Tanuth. 2 police officers who faced a knife-wielding attacker in a Dunedin supermarket last year have been recognised for their courage. Our reporter Kate Green and cameraman Samuel Rillstone were there.
Constable Sophie Ellison and Detective Constable Jeremy Toski were off duty when a man carrying a knife went on a stabbing spree in a Dunedin supermarket. Instead of running for the door, they stepped in. Today, as they were honoured for their bravery, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says their actions saved lives.
The courageous actions of Constable Ellison and DC Toski, along with the Countdown staff and members of the public, unquestionably prevented this highly motivated offender from killing and or inflicting further serious injury on staff and members of the public in the supermarket that day. Constable Ellison and Detective Constable Toski, we thank you for your service It is the very demonstration of true service, but also of true courage.
4 people were injured that day in May, and the attacker was charged with attempted murder. Constable Allison was the first officer on the scene, attempting to restrain the offender despite him holding a knife in each hand. She was joined quickly by Mr. Toski, who tried to distract the offender by throwing Ajax bottles at him. Neither knew the other was in the supermarket until they were responding to the attack.
Coming from opposite ends, so looking up and I think I noticed first the Ajax bottle. I was like, who was throwing that? I was like, oh, it's Jeremy. So it was quite a relief knowing someone else was there that I knew sort of had the same intentions.
Constable Allison said the fact that the nomination came from her colleagues made the award extra special.
Just really quickly, just want to say thank you very much. It is really a special honour to be given this. It's really nice to have our family and friends be able to come up and support us. It was, a very chaotic situation, and everybody jumped in and helped how they could, other Countdown staff and members of the public, and everyone did the best they could, but it is really special to be nominated and given this by our colleagues. It's really special, thank you.
Much what Sophie said, thank you very much.
Despite the extraordinary bravery of the officers, staff and the public, Police Association President Chris Cahill says events like this should have been prevented.
I think we all know that we've got a significant problem with people that suffer in mental distress in New Zealand, and they need help. Someone like this really should have got help before it got to this stage, and if that's a message that comes out of today, I think it's a really important one.
Police responded to 192,000 calls for people suffering mental distress last year alone.
Pretty amazing people and very humble. If you were listening on radio, the video version of that story will be on our webpage. RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. New Zealand has its first confirmed case of a new COVID subvariant. ESR says it's sequenced a case of Omicron subvariant BQ.1.1. The Ministry of Health says the variant has also been detected in wastewater samples in Te Waipounamu, the South Island. Dr. Joop de Lit told Checkpoint it spreads more easily than other variants, and they're watching it quite closely to see if it will cause another peak. Cases have been steadily rising in Europe. New Zealand's youngest ever mayor says news that he'd won the Gore mayoralty by just 8 votes was greeted enthusiastically by his mother. 23-year-old Ben Bell has ousted long-serving Gore district mayor Tracy Hicks in a tight contest confirmed today. Mr Bell told Checkpoint his elevation to the position is still sinking in.
My mother just happened to be in the room, so she was ecstatic, big hugs and everything like that. I could barely get off the phone before the excitement went through the building.
Ben Bell says he spoke with people of all ages during his campaign and took a caravan to the smaller centres in the district to show they aren't forgotten. In the Southland district, Lumsden businessman Rob Scott is the new mayor after the final count of special votes. He was ahead of Southland farmer Geoffrey Young by 39 votes, while incumbent Gary Tong is 6 votes further behind Mr Young. Mr Scott says he's over the moon and humbled by the result. He says he's looking forward to working with the councillors and the community boards to do Southland proud. The voter return was 47%, excluding special votes. The head of one of Auckland's biggest council-operated agencies says it's up to the new council to make any changes to the board. Wayne Brown wants the chairperson and directors of council-controlled organisation Eke Panuku Development to step down. Panuku is responsible for developments and investment around the city, including Auckland's Wynyard Quarter. Its chairperson, Paul Majuri, says he's happy to have a kōrero with Mr Brown to discuss the board's performance. Mr Majuri says the Panuku team has done a great job for Tāmaki Makaurau, and all CCOs serve at the pleasure of the council. The Oceans, Fisheries and Environment Minister, David Parker, says some aspects of climate change are beyond New Zealanders' control, but that's no excuse to do nothing. A new government report today shows sea levels are rising at a faster rate than predicted, and coastal waters are warmer, dirtier and more acidic than ever. Mr Parker says it's a stark warning.
The most disturbing part of the report on the marine environment is the things that are in part beyond our control, which is changing sea temperatures caused by climate change. And in some ways, they're the greatest risk.
David Parker says the government is tackling emissions from transport, agriculture and plastic pollution. Thousands of people are waiting to hear what will happen to their lifetime ski passes for Ruapehu, with the ski lift operator having announced voluntary administration this week. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts administrators, PwC, say all options are on the table as they try to restore the company. Ohakune resident Harry Haralambi says he bought his lifetime pass for about $2,000 in 1996. He's not expecting it will work by this time next year.
It was always going to be the case whether the business goes into liquidation or Vale Resorts came and bought the ski resort, or NZ Ski bought the ski resort. They wouldn't honour some previous thing, but that's one of the risks you kind of take.
Harry Haralambi believes the company was essentially hamstrung by its charitable status because it could only earn money predominantly from ski passes. The leader of Gloria Vale Christian community has told the Abuse and Care Inquiry that all decisions were made based on community doctrine and the Bible. 82-year-old Howard Temple says it used to be up to a group of men to make the final judgment on allegations of abuse at the community. He agreed that a comment he made, that the limit of knowledge by leaders about abuse was because victims were reluctant to come forward, was actually victim blaming.
It could be interpreted that way, yes. The victim could not have spoken up and out of fear or something, reason like that.
Howard Temple admitted the leadership didn't used to report allegations of abuse to police. And the Palmerston North City Council is asking people not to take it upon themselves to fix local roads. Someone filled potholes on Richardson's line with concrete on Tuesday. The council says it was illegal and dangerous. It says the road is made of chip seal, which doesn't mix with concrete. The council says it already had plans to repair the holes, but now needs to get the concrete removed. It acknowledges it can be frustrating when potholes aren't repaired urgently, but says people should report their concerns rather than attempt a fix themselves. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, regular guest Michelle Grant, President of the Structural Engineering Society of New Zealand, joins the show again to talk about the National Seismic Hazard Model. People fixing the world on the growing number of people looking for ways to be sustainable in death as well as life. And overseas correspondent from Taipei, William Yang, joins us with the latest news from Taiwan. That's on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday for Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Often cloudy. A few showers, some possibly heavy in Northland, clearing Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow afternoon. From Waikato to Manawatu, including the Bay of Plenty and Central High Country, showers, some heavy and thundery today, clearing from the south this evening and tomorrow morning, but remaining mostly cloudy. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with scattered showers. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Waded Upper and the Marlborough Sounds, mostly cloudy. Rain clearing this evening and fine breaks developing, however isolated showers developing tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Marlborough, also Canterbury and North Otago, partly cloudy, isolated light showers clearing tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, also Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, generally fine. Some cloudy periods about Dunedin, Clutha and Southland. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few light showers. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines is at 6:30. Kia ora rā e ho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown's been holding a series of one-on-ones with councillors, both new and returned, in his words, to discuss how each can best contribute. In stark contrast, he's over the contribution being made by the board of the council's development arm, Panuku, today calling for them all to resign. So Checkpoint caught up with two councillors who have had their scheduled kōrero to see if they're at one with the mayor's priorities. They're veteran Manukau councillor Alf Filipina and North Shore's returning Richard Hills. Kia ora, Richard. It's Lisa Owen from RNZ Checkpoint. How did your meeting go with Mayor Brown?
Yeah, it was really good, really positive. I enjoyed letting him know my priorities for the shore and for the city, and he let me know his, and it was, it's just a good conversation. I had never met him before, so it was really nice to kind of understand where he's coming from and hear a bit about his family. And
So did your priorities align with his priorities?
yeah, some of them, yeah, definitely.
Which ones?
It was a confidential conversation, so I probably won't go into things right now. But yeah, I mean, he wants good progress for the city, and so do I.
So when you say it's a confidential conversation, who decided that? Were you told not to talk about it?
No. I just assume because we're meeting alone and it's just a getting to know each other conversation, I think I'll just respect that the conversation was just between us and getting to know each other. And
So what are your top 2 priorities then?
transport and environment and climate change. Really.
So when it comes to transport, do you think the whole board of Auckland Transport needs to go?
I think there are, conversations that could be had to improve the situation, but my concern if the board went all at once, then what actually happens after that?
So then potentially you're not aligned with the Mayor Wayne Brown on that because he's wanting to get rid of the board there and also from the council's development Eke Panuku. So do you think they should go as well, that board?
Yeah, we didn't discuss those issues, and I think we need to discuss them as a council as well. So,
but I'm asking you as an individual councillor about what your feelings are. Do you think it would be wise to have a clean sweep of all council-controlled organisations, getting rid of the boards and chairs?
No, I don't think everyone going at once is a good thing.
Did you tell him that?
We didn't discuss that. So honestly, this has been a 1-hour conversation of getting to know each other. So I think we all are meeting tomorrow, and so it'll be good to discuss all these issues together.
So if it was a getting to know you conversation, what do you think you came away with knowing about Wayne Brown that you didn't know before?
I have now got an impression he's a, positive guy. He wants things to happen. He cares about the city. He was interested to hear about all our ideas and what our priorities were. So I felt that he really genuinely wants to work with all of us.
Hey, did he serve biscuits, Richard? And if so, what were they?
He may have. I didn't ask for any biscuits, so yeah.
Did you get a cup of tea out of it at least?
No, I had my own coffee.
Hello there, Lisa.
You've had your meeting with the new mayor. How did it go, Alf?
Yeah, no, look, it obviously went well. We both sort of shared the views we wanted to share around what I want to achieve and he as well. So, yeah, it was good. It was good because we just basically spoke to each other around the priorities from my perspective.
And so what did you share with him in terms of your priorities?
Community, one of them, and asked him, I'd obviously, when I chaired the Parks, Arts, Community Events Committee, we had Māori Outcomes budget, and sort of shared with him that from my perspective, Māori Outcomes budget, our regional parks and destination parks is one, and other things as well as libraries.
Are you worried, Alf, that those are the things that might get trimmed if there's a bit of cost cutting and savings to be had?
That's why I asked him about that, and he says no. That's definitely still in there.
So did you take that as a commitment, Alf? A commitment from the Mayor to continue financial support?
Yeah, look, of course I did. Of course I did, because that was one of the issues that I wanted to at least ask him about. So I was happy with the conversation we had with that.
So what did he tell
you? Key thing. Oh, he just gave me the reasons why, around the budget, and that's going to be his concern around the budget, and basically, look, I just listened to the concerns he had, which he's already expressed during the campaign.
So he's made, as you indicated, some of his feelings very clear during the campaign and in these first few days after the election. And one of the issues for him is council-controlled organisations, and he's encouraging people to fall on their swords, basically, Alf. Do you think that more board members need to go and chairs?
All I know from a CCO perspective is that we ended up setting the statement of intent. I haven't had any reason from my perspective to end up saying, look, this is they need to go, because that's his call.
What kind of position are you interested in, Alf, this time round?
Oh, look, I made it sort of obvious to Wayne that, I thought I did a very good job with the Parks, Arts, Community and Events Committee around achieving the work program, but I did say to him, however, there is a Māori saying that the kumara never tells people how sweet it is. So I made it clear for him that, look, I would like to stay in that position, but that's his call. I'm not going to sort of start crying. I'm too old to start crying now if nothing doesn't happen.
What were your impressions of him based on that meeting?
Well, for me, at least I know he's straight up, and that's what he's done. It's just told me, hey, look, this is the reason why. And for me, hey, that's all you want to find out about people, is that they are straight up and they're not going to, I don't know, BS, I think is the word.
Did you have any thoughts or recommendations for a deputy mayor?
Yeah, I shared that with him. I obviously won't end up saying who I thought, and it wasn't me.
So, Alf, did he say that's a great idea when you suggested the deputy mayor?
All I know, he just said, oh, okay. And I said, okay, thanks. That was it.
Just one more pressing question before we go.
Yes,
did he
my friend.
serve you morning tea or anything? Did you get a bicky and a cup of tea? Or
No,
was it
no.
Really? Mm.
No.
Whoa, did you feel like you're on the fast track, Alf? In and out?
I just thought to myself, would have been good if he had KFC is no good because it's healthy stuff. So for me, even if we just there, I think it's business. I've said that. He's explained, and I'm saying, okay, thank you. See you later.
And that was Councillor Alf Filipaina there. Still getting your feedback on Wayne Brown, the Auckland Mayor. This person says Wayne Brown is a Trump copy in the making. Lots of noise but without substance. Stale and stuck in the mud, just working for his mates while the going is good. Young generation New Zealanders miss their chance and will pay long-term the price. Someone else says, Wayne Brown getting rid of all these people, how much is it going to cost the ratepayers in redundancies? Well, probably nothing, because he's not making them redundant. He wants them to quit, doesn't he? And another person says, I wish Ben, this is the new Gore mayor, had won in Auckland. Wayne Brown sounds like a spoiled child. Thanks for your feedback, 2101 on text. It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A BBC World Service investigation has found TikTok is taking up to 70% of charity donations given through their app to hundreds of displaced families in Syria. Charities have accused the social media giant of violating its own terms and the family's human rights. Hannah Gilbert reports.
These Syrian children are broadcasting live on TikTok, often for hours at a time. They celebrate when they get TikTok gifts, which animate onto the screen like a stream of roses or a roaring lion, and cost anything from a few pence up to around £450. For the past 5 months, the BBC has been following more than 300 accounts on TikTok, live streaming from camps in Syria. Viewers around the world are regularly spending more than £1,000 an hour in total on these virtual gifts. We wanted to know how this trend started, so we asked Mohammed Abdullah, a Syrian journalist, to look into it.
A lot of these people don't know how to read or write or use TikTok, so there must be someone behind this.
Mohammed recognised one of the camps from the videos. It's in northwest Syria, near the border with Turkey. When he went there, he immediately found families begging on TikTok. This is Mona.
The children go on lives with me. I tell people about my life in the camps and how we lost our home, and about my daughter's situation so that people will support me.
Her husband was killed in an airstrike, and she now lives in the camp with her 6 daughters. One of them, Sharifa, is blind. The family has been doing live streams for several hours a day to raise money for an operation for her. But Mona doesn't do TikTok lives on her own. She gets help from Hamid. Hamid's also displaced. In the camps, he's known as a TikTok middleman. He works with 12 different families and says he sold his livestock to pay for a phone and internet connection. He also provides the families with TikTok accounts.
We go on TikTok Live and receive gifts. For example, a rose. Every 100 roses gets me $1. I keep saving money until I get $100. I then go to the money transfer shop in Aldana town.
Hamid buys UK SIM cards from a kiosk near the camp, a tactic that makes his live streams more likely to appear in the feeds of TikTok users in the UK. He says British TikTokers make the most generous donations.
I love you.
I love you, thank you.
But several families told us they don't receive a fair wage for their work on TikTok.
They only gave me $14 for 8 days' work. After that, I stopped doing it.
When Dokan went live on TikTok, he says the man filming wouldn't let him take breaks to eat or take his medication. He says he was paid next to nothing for his work, and we heard the same from other families. So if people are donating more than £1,000 an hour, where's all that money going? We asked TikTok what cut they take, but they wouldn't say. So we tested it for ourselves. We asked Mohammed, the Syrian journalist, to go live from the outskirts of a camp near Idlib, using a TikTok account that was set up in Syria.
Hello friends, we are in the camp of northwest Syria.
From another account in London, we sent £90 in TikTok gifts. When Mohammed checked the app, he could see that TikTok had taken almost 70%. By the time you include fees for withdrawing the money and paying middlemen, Mohammed would be left with about £17, less than 20% of the donations made. And often the families we spoke to get much less. We contacted TikTok and asked them for an interview. Instead, they sent us a statement saying that this type of content is not allowed on their platform and they would strengthen their global policies around exploitative begging. As for the 70% cut, TikTok insist they take less than that, but they still won't confirm the exact amount.
That report from the BBC. Iran's education minister says protesting school children are being sent to psychological institutions. As women burn headscarves and cut off their hair in nationwide protests, Youssef Nouri told an Iranian newspaper that school students participating in street protests are being detained and taken to mental health facilities. Mr Nouri says the establishments holding the students are meant to reform the students to prevent antisocial behaviour. CNN's Jamani Karashe reports.
Calls for nationwide protests on Wednesday brought Iranians back onto the streets of cities across the country. Protesters undeterred by a ruthless regime's crackdown on peaceful demonstrations. And they were met with utter brutality. Baton-swinging policemen beating up those who tried to get away. And this disturbing scene caught on camera. Plainclothes security forces opening fire on the streets of Tehran after a small group gathered chanting, "Mullahs get lost." But perhaps the most terrifying response to protests this week is the government's decision to detain school children protesting and send them to psychological institutions to be, quote, reformed and re-educated. A chilling message from a regime that now appears to feel threatened by fearless young schoolgirls. A regime clearly under pressure, not only struggling to contain protests that are spreading like a wildfire, now facing strikes that could hit an economy already on its knees. Some oil workers now striking, blocking roads and burning tires. Their strikes so far limited and not unusual, but some are now joining in the anti-regime chants. This could be a sign of trouble the government literally can't afford.
Strikes have historically played a very important role in Iranian revolts. They were at the core of both of the revolutions that Iran had in the 20th century, the constitutional revolution and then the 1979 revolution. The oil and gas industry, of course, is particularly sensitive because that is where much of the state's hard currency earnings are derived from.
Many businesses in the mostly Kurdish region have been shuttered for days as calls grow for a national general strike.
People are keeping a very close eye on that. But, you know, if there is a general strike, if there is a nationwide general strike, I mean, what can the government do, really? I mean, you can't send troops into people's homes to drag them out and force them to go to work. So, that would completely paralyse the state and would show the powerlessness of the state in the face of this movement.
A movement of nationwide protests that's morphed into an uprising, growing stronger by the day, proving harder and harder for the repressive republic to control.
We call it a fart tax. Across the ditch, they call it a burp tax. Either way, the Australian government is reassuring farmers neither will be happening there. They've been following closely what's happening in New Zealand, where the farming sector will have to start paying for greenhouse gas emissions from 2025. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
The New Zealand government's proposed tax on agricultural emissions is already capturing the attention of producers in Australia, but West Australian farmer Graham Dent doubts Australia will be copying the Kiwis.
I don't think they will go down that path in Australia because we're working very hard to set up a benchmark for our emissions, and we're all aiming for the net zero by 2030. I'm almost positive they won't be whacking a tax on it.
He runs a sheep and pig farm at Cuballing in the state's wheat belt, south of Perth.
We run a 350 sow piggery, and we've got 2,500 breeding ewes and a cropping program which consists of wheat, barley, lupins and canola.
As the president of the West Australian Pork Producers Association, Graham Dent has been keeping an eye on New Zealand's plans from 2025 to make farmers pay for the greenhouse gas emissions from their livestock. He says there's no need for a similar scheme here.
It's funny, in New Zealand apparently 50% of emissions come from agriculture, and in WA 10% come from agriculture, and 3% of that comes from intensive industries, being feedlots, piggeries.
Livestock emissions include the methane belched out by cows, pigs and sheep, and the nitrous oxide emitted in their urine. Nationals leader David Littleproud wants the federal government to rule out what he calls a burp tax.
It's going to cost New Zealand farmers around $13,000 a year. What happens is that gets passed down to the consumer at the checkout. With respect to methane, it has a shelf life of around 10 or 12 years. So the world hasn't quite worked out how to deal with methane emissions. To rush into it would be reckless.
Around 13% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, but the Federal Agriculture Minister, Murray Watt, says a New Zealand-style tax is a step too far.
Australia has no plans whatsoever to legislate livestock emissions, and we don't have any plans to reduce herd sizes or introduce methane levies. What we want to do is work with the livestock sector to build on its record in cutting emissions.
Australia's red meat industry plans to be carbon neutral by 2030 by planting trees and changing livestock diets to include seaweed, which produces less methane. Senator Watt says work is already underway to meet global market expectations.
Most of the farmers that I meet are already onto the need to reduce emissions, and I think that the government can play a big role helping them get there further. So I think that we can meet the expectations of our trading partners, but it is going to require more work in partnership with industry, and I think that's a really exciting opportunity for our agriculture sector going forward.
Meanwhile, the federal government is yet to make a decision on whether Australia will sign a global pledge to reduce methane emissions.
The ABC's Angus Randall reporting. The United Nations General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly to condemn Russia's attempts to annex regions of Ukraine. Only 4 countries voted with Russia: Belarus, North Korea, Syria and Nicaragua. Meanwhile, in Brussels, more than 50 Western countries are pledging military aid to Ukraine, with President Putin under increasing pressure at home and abroad for the invasion of Ukraine. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg considers what his next move might be.
What will Vladimir Putin do next in Ukraine? What is he thinking? His special military operation has not gone according to plan. But U-turns, that's not his style.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
This is...
Спасибо. Прошу вас.
At an event in Moscow, classic Putin. The Kremlin leader painting Russia as the victim and the authorities in Kiev as terrorists. Keep in mind, though, that it was Russia that invaded Ukraine.
I don't follow them.
Konstantin Remchukov's newspaper has criticised Russian officials for nuclear saber-rattling during the special operation. He says Putin wants a new world order and don't expect de-escalation anytime soon.
He is authoritarian leader of a nuclear power. He is unchallenged leader in this country. And he has some strong beliefs and perceptions which drive him crazy. And he started to believe that this is existential.
Would Putin really go nuclear in Ukraine? He's dropped unsubtle hints. Days before the Russian invasion, the president oversaw massive nuclear drills. He's since warned the West he's not bluffing about the nuclear option. In Putin's mind, for him, defeat is unimaginable. If you'd run a country for 22 years, like Vladimir Putin has, and if you'd silenced all your critics and crushed the opposition like Putin has, you may well feel, like Putin appears to feel, that you will always end up a winner. To acknowledge that any other outcome is possible means facing up to an unpalatable fact that you're not invincible. And in a country with no checks or balances, and where the leaders don't feel accountable to the public, there are few constraints on Kremlin decision-making.
The problem is that the system which was created in this 30 years didn't create the society. There is a lot of very nice people in Russia. I think you met them, but there is no civil society. That's why Russia can't resist.
For now, resistance to the Kremlin is coming from Ukraine and the West.
And that is about all we have time for this evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō. On First Up from 5 a.m, they go to the dogs. Literally, Nathan speaks to the organiser of Christchurch's first ever Colombo dog fashion show. Awesome. Catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. New Zealand has its first confirmed case of a new COVID subvariant. ESR says it's watching the Omicron subvariant BQ.1.1 closely to see if it will cause another peak. The head of one of Auckland's biggest council-operated agencies says it's up to the new council to make any changes to the board. Ben Bell has won the Gore mayoralty, becoming New Zealand's youngest ever mayor by just 8 votes. And scientists at Stanford School of Medicine have successfully transplanted human brain tissue into rats. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
It's like being our own little ground level storm here.
The challenges of researching emperor penguins are all too clear in this week's episode of Our Changing World.
To be honest, I think the team would go out if a bird came back, but it would be really unpleasant working out there at the moment.
Join us as we revisit the voices from